A very good evening to you. Welcome to another edition of Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Paulion. We'll be together until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we'll be concluding with the clip that peaked. We hope that you'll stay with us, and of course, we'll be taking your calls a little bit later. There's a very important issue that we have to discuss this evening. And it's not that we have not gone that road before. We have placed particular emphasis on it. We have made reference to the deficiencies in that particular sector. But time and time again, we have to revisit it because the impression is being given that the authorities are not paying attention. And I think to a certain extent, members of the St. Lucian Society are not giving it the kind of attention and focus that it deserves. I'm not talking about the crime situation. I'm not talking about education. But I'm speaking about and making reference to the state of the health sector in St. Lucia. And I'm told that within the next few months, we should be opening our new general hospital. And there are some concerns that we have to attend to, for example, staffing and also equipping that health institution. But in a general sense, you watching this broadcast, I'm sure that you have your own fears with regard to healthcare, and if you are ill, how you will be attended to in terms of you recuperating and so on. My guest this evening is well placed to discuss that issue. Just a few days ago in a media appearance, he did say that the time for action is now, and let us stop the talking. He is former Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Stephen King. Welcome to the program, sir.
Hi. Thank you.
Doc, what's the state of the island's health sector?
It's interesting because, you know, Bob Marley says, in the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. And the St. Lucian health sector, we have a lot of assets. We have great staff, well-trained doctors and nurses, more so than we've probably ever had before. We have health facilities, health centers, polyclinics. We have new hospital, essentially virtually fully equipped. You know, we've got a half-built hospital in St. Jude in the Vieux Fort that we have to finish. But essentially, we have a lot of assets. And also, if you think about it, we've got a lot of fiscal space, because St. Lucia right now, based on all our estimates, spends probably just under 6% of our, just about 5.4% of our GDP on health. And the average in the Caribbean is actually 6.6%. And some countries are even higher than that. So in other words, we even have fiscal space in which we can invest more into health. The point being, we are well poised. We have a lot of assets, and we have a lot of scope to do great work in this country. Where we are failing is in our organization and our coordination, and in fact, our implementation of the integrated health systems that we need to put in place, and the health financing that we need to put in place, because we're still leaving too many people to fend for themselves.
Why have we failed? In a case of not having the right people in the right position to take the corrective steps, or is a case where, again, the authorities, the governments, they have not really undertaken the various measures that should have been implemented, let's say, at least a decade ago?
That's a hard question to answer, Tim. But let's look at the financing, because maybe it's easier to answer it from that perspective. You know, a minister of finance, a government, is always nervous about going to its people and saying, we need to take more money from you so that we can fund the health service. So, because that's from the time you go to people and say, I'm going to take some money from you for the health service, somebody is going to object.
You think that we're so selfish, we don't realize that it's for our own well-being?
I think we do, but I think we play politics with this. So in other words, you have the people who are against the government for whatever reason would then argue, you know, oh, they come in to take more money. Look at them again. Why don't they just fund it like this or fund it like that? But the truth is you have to raise extra money.
But they take money anyway from the people to fund other projects.
Exactly. And I think health, for me, and I think for most of us in this country, having a good health system and having a well-funded health system and knowing that if we got sick or if our child got sick, we would not be scrambling to find the money, filling out little sheets, begging people for $5 and $10 or whatever to try and get the money to get a CT scan or to get an MRI or to go to Martinique or whatever it is we need to do. And, you know, in the last couple of years, especially in the last year, we've actually come up with a package of services and costed it. And so we know what essentially that we need, how much money we need in the health sector.
So that is how much money?
Okay. Presently, the government puts about $108 million into the health sector.
Annually?
Annually,
Mm-hmm.
right? The private sector runs at about almost $95 or so million a year. However, the overall health sector requires about $275 if we were to treat $275 million, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
if we were to treat everybody with everything and everybody access to all services. We fully appreciate that doesn't happen. So what we said, we'd have to do a scaled up system. And right now, we believe that in the first year, if we, and the Prime Minister mentioned it or the Minister of Finance mentioned in the budget, if we raised $179 million in a public fund, we would be able to deliver a package of services that would revolutionize or cause the health service to be what we think it should be. Clearly, that 179 is going to have to be increased as the years go by, as people take up more of the services and as we expand the package. And therefore, the design of the health financing had to be a system that can increase the revenue into the health fund. So, for instance, one of the things we were looking at doing, and the Prime Minister mentioned it in the budget, go to NIC. If we were like social health insurance, many countries have gone to their social security agency, like the National Insurance Corporation, and they have taken deductions from there. Therefore, as you get more employed people, because if you're running your economy well and you're getting more employment, as you get more employed people, you get more revenue from that stream of employed persons. So that is one mechanism that allows you to get more revenue into the fund.
But what is happening right now is that, I mean, you have high unemployment, particularly among the nation's youth. Mm-hmm. So do you think that we'll be able to raise the funds from persons who are currently employed? Well,
what we have to do, and that's why what we're proposing is a hybrid system, because, and the number of proposals on the table, I must tell you, there's a private health insurance model, and there's a social health insurance taxation model, a hybrid model. The hybrid model would say that we need to, because we know that employed persons, we have just over 52,000 employed persons right now who are paying NIC, or NIC contributors. That is not enough to raise the amount of money that we require. So we know that we'll have to continue the consolidated fund monies, which is the general government revenues. And we also believe that we may need to actually augment that by having some additional taxes on unhealthy products. I think on a previous show with you, we mentioned that about increased taxes on alcohol, on sugared and salted and canned and processed foods and all those sorts of things. There are options there to raise additional monies. So if you have a hybrid system like that, where you don't just go to one source to try and get all your money, but you spread it out. In fact, Jamaica has a health fund that we looked at. And the Jamaican Health Fund raises its money from contributions from the NIC, so salary contributions, from a tax on petroleum and vehicles, and a tax on cigarettes, that goes into the health fund. And that health fund actually looks at pharmaceuticals and other services. But that is the kind of model that we think we need to go with. At least that's the one that I think is most feasible in a country where there's high unemployment.
How soon are you hoping that the authorities will buy into this idea of having this fund established?
I believe that the country has already, I believe that the government, successive governments have already bought into the concept of having a health fund that would either be managed by private health insurance or by a social security agency such as the NIC, right? So I think that that is already agreed.
But implementation is normally an issue.
Implementation is the issue because you see, everybody, if the government comes out today and says, well, we are going to raise, as one of the recommendations we had, and the Prime Minister mentioned in the budget, we're going to raise your NIC contributions by 5%. So no longer will you just give 10% NIC contribution, you now give 15%, half-half between employer and employee.
7.5 and 7.5?
7.5. People are going to quarrel. But in fact, if you look at NIC contributions, Social Security contributions in the Caribbean, those like BVI, which has a health insurance model, they actually pay 7.5% right now. Not five, not an additional 5, an additional 7.5% for their health fund. And when you speak to them, they will tell you that what it has done, it has improved access so that people who previously did not have access to healthcare now have access. So,
can an issue of that nature be politicized? Because I could hear some people calling the various talk shows and saying that it is the government of the United Workers' Party which promised to ease the squeeze, to improve your standard of living, and yet still increasing your NIC contributions from 5% to 7.5%. That's you as the employee, and your employer putting an extra burden on them to increase it to 7.5%. Should there be a coalescing of the minds as far as government and opposition is concerned on this issue?
And not only, yes, they should, but not only them, I think the general public. You know, it's time that we as St. Lucians prioritize in our lives what's important and what we are prepared to pool and pay for. And pooled, paid for health services, a single payer, a pooled health fund managed effectively is the most cost-effective and sensible way to go. So I think as St. Lucians, we should tell our politicians that we need this. People out there, many of us right now may not be sick, but we all know people who have been sick, and we all know people who are sick in our families, and we know the struggles that they have to go through if they have to buy medication, if they have to get surgery, worse yet if they have cancer and have to get radiotherapy. We know, and I think earlier when we were talking, we know that there are many people who actually give up if they have a serious illness and they cannot raise the money for the treatment. That's it. And this is no longer tenable. And the thing is, we can, as a country, if we came together, do this. There is no reason why it is very feasible to be done. Yes, we have to make a sacrifice, but it is feasible to be done.
Is that in our DNA? We had it all the time. Barbadians in the 80s decided that they would go through some austerity measures because in the long run, I don't think they wanted the Barbadian dollar to be devalued. In the case of St. Lucia, do we have a record of us wanting to make certain sacrifices for the betterment of the entire nation?
Well, I think if you go into history and you look at the whole concept of the coming out of slavery, I like the concept of the flower societies, La Marguerite and La Rose, when they first came out, and they were actually community susus, and they were community coup de main type approaches. So poor people.
And I know Kingsley will tell you about the cooperative movement.
Exactly. So poor people understood that if they came together and everybody put up 5 cents, then there'll be a fund that people could use for crises or for investment in something, be it your house or whatever. They knew that that together, that when you pool your money as a community, it works. There are things that you can now do that you could not do if you had not pooled. And healthcare is the same thing. It's really the same concept, except we're doing it on a national level. So I think it is important that, yes, the politicians come together on this. I think that, you know, the politics of division on something like healthcare, there's no room for that. And I think that it would be good if every leader in the country, political and otherwise, could wrap their heads around what kind of health system works and what they are prepared to advocate for and encourage. Because you and I know there are too many people that are suffering in the present system. And like I said, back to Bob Marley, in the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty, when we could be doing better.
Selling this idea,
Yes.
do you envisage that there will be hurdles to be cleared?
Of course.
In what way?
Well, first, we're talking about one right now. If, you know, and in fact, I was thinking a little bit earlier, in fact. Right now, many companies and many of us take private insurance. Many companies will have a private insurance. About 10% of solutions, based on the stats that I have, are privately insured. And they pay about $24 million in premiums. And they get about $17 million worth of health care paid for out of that fund. With a fund that we're talking about, a UHC, National Health Fund that we are talking about, you would no longer need to do that. So rather than your employer having a group insurance, group private insurance, you would now have your NIC contribution to the health fund, which covers you for overseas care, it covers you for your hospital care, it covers you for your community services care, your pharmaceuticals, your laboratory tests, and so on and so forth. It covers all those bases. So I think that so that's one of the first points of selling.
But what will happen to those private insurance companies now?
Now that's interesting, because I had a meeting with the private insurance companies some time ago, and I also met, and they were pointing out to me about the BVI model. When BVI implemented their national health insurance, they did take away business from private insurers. However, there's always additional add-on care that one needs. So what one company in particular was telling me, because they're a big company and they operate in the BVI as well, they were saying that although their quantum of business shrunk, but their profitability went up, because now they were insuring for events that are or interventions that are unlikely to be necessary. So people are paying for the comfort of being able to get a liver transplant, a bone marrow transplant, to go to Miami or whatever the case may be. And they could sell those insurances relatively cheaply, because these are events that don't happen very often. Because when you have a good NHI system and you can offer the bulk of care, and NHI is the first payer, you don't really have to 99%, well, maybe not as much as that, 95% of your care is already covered. So the private insurance has that 5% and is more profitable for them. That's the point he was making to me. In fact, I must tell you, although I work in the BVI, it is that insurer that representative, who made me look at BVI more seriously. Because when he said that, because I was always worried about the private insurance business. But when he said that, I said, well, that's interesting that he would say that the BVI model actually works because it makes them more profitable in private insurance. So back to the argument. The argument, I think, to people is that, let us say you're going to pay $110 premium per month for your private insurance. $110 premium into a national health fund would get you a lot more service, a lot more care. We wouldn't have pre-existing conditions. You'd have lifetime care. So when you're elderly, you would still get your care. So in other words, you know, a lot of private insurance, they eliminate pre-existing conditions. Mm-hmm. They restrict the risks, or they limit their risks. And older people, they don't cover as well. Now, a national health insurance would cover you with pre-existing and throughout your lifespan. So I think one of the main arguments is really a purely financial, individual argument. It's cheaper. You get more care for less money, less premiums when you do the national health insurance.
Will this national health insurance initiative come into force this year?
I hope so. I think from discussions I've been having, I suspect it might be next year, April, with the new budget. That might be more feasible. But it would be really nice to see, at least because a lot of groundwork has to be done before we can actually implement. I mean, there's certain legislation, arrangements have to be made. For instance, the NIC has to agree if we were to go that way. Or if it's a private insurance model, the private insurers would have to have agreed that that's how they want to go. So that homework has to be done. And I would hope that as we're opening up the OKEU hospital in the next over the next couple of weeks to months, by December we should be well into the final stages of a national health insurance UHC fund that can do what is necessary.
There's a period when all indications were that we'll be having UHC That never came to pass. I think you headed a few committees and you had some stakeholders and so on. What is to say that this new idea, which seemed feasible, workable and so on, will not be implemented?
That it will not be implemented? Mm-hmm. I think the pressure is on because the new hospital and the upcoming St. Jude Hospital, where we have to find money for and open and find additional monies to run, I think the financial pressure is on. And I don't think that the existing government budget has enough, there's enough room in existing government finance to increase the health budget to do what is necessary. So we must find additional revenues and we must find a new way of financing. So I don't think we have any choice really but to go. And so.
But doesn't that say something about how we develop our country in various sectors and so on? As if we have to be cornered, we have to be pushed, we have to be in a position where we have absolutely no choice but to take a particular course of action for things to happen?
Well, that's true. I mean, there's some truth to that. But hey, we can't go back and correct. I mean, I really wish. I remember having a conversation many years ago with Emma Hippolyte and Dr. Anthony, talking about health and environmental levy at that point in time we were looking at, and to raise additional monies into a national health fund, to create a fund and start to put money in. And that was a long time ago. That was, I mean, in the early or the mid 2000s, somewhere around there, 2006 or so. Maybe even before that, 2005 or whatever. And if we had started a fund then, we would have a good fund even now. So when we're scrambling to find monies to do certain capital works, capital investments at St. Jude or wherever, we'd have actually had a fund already. So I regret that we did not make decisions earlier. I did understand at the time why we didn't do it, because that levy was actually going out anyway, and VAT was about to come in. And remember, you may remember that we started to say, well, VAT would be the additional revenues. A portion of VAT would go into the health fund. Mm. But again, we didn't do that either. So we lost that opportunity, right? And even this time around, we reduced the VAT by 2.5% this financial year. And again, I tell you, in my own little heart, I wish we had taken the 2.5% and just put it into the health fund. But I mean, that's, again, what can you do? I mean, these decisions have been made. So, yes, I wish we'd made decisions earlier, but we are where we are, and we got to move from here. So here's where we are, and we can move. There are options for us, but we need people to buy into it. We need people to agree to it. And I mean, I think that it's important that St. Lucian people stop and think about how they finance their health care and understand that it's much better to come together as a country and establish this health fund than A, trying to do it on your own, or B, just resisting for other reasons other than what is necessary. In other words, other than health reasons, if you see where I'm coming from. Mm-hmm. So for political or other reasons, or you don't like this person or that person or this advocate or that advocate. That we have to stop and focus on what we need to do and how we need to do it.
In the event that we have a health fund going,
mm-hmm.
Do you envisage that there'll be a need to take other steps a few years later because of the increasing cost of healthcare?
Yes, and you see, one of the ways we'd gone about working out the costs and cost containing in the model that we're promoting is we looked at a package of services which is built on the numbers of people and the prevalence of disease and the interventions you can do for each disease. So diabetes or whatever, as the case may be, how many people would end up in hospital, how many days they spend in hospital, what drugs they would require, etc., etc. So we have all that costed. So what that allows you to do is monitor the costs by each diagnosis, both in community and in the hospital, so that's the whole health sector, contain them, and in fact decide how you're going to increase the package of services. So you can decide we will start with a package of this amount, so we will cover this amount of conditions with these interventions. And then as we get more money into the fund and we see it's more feasible, we might increase the package. Because it's, in other words, we have flexibility. Once you have an integrated system where we can actually say, these are the interventions we're going to do, and these are the diagnoses we're going to make, and I don't know if you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Once we have that control, we can now control the cost of healthcare. And we can also seek more, shall we say, more cost-effective approaches. So, for instance, let's take mental health, which mental health is in crisis in our country. Our mental health model is an expensive model at this point in time because it's really a very institutional-based model. If we're in an integrated system, we moved more towards community mental health services and building those services in community, building capacity in communities with workers, even facilities that we can use and so on for people with mental illness. What we would do, not only would give a better product, but it'd be a much cheaper product. Because when we did our estimates, our current model, if we had to treat every person with a mental illness in our country in the manner in which we are presently doing with the hospitalization, one, we wouldn't have enough beds, and two, it would cost us like about $21 million. Whereas
annually?
Annually.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we went to the community mental health model, probably for $10 million, we could deliver better care for all the people. And of course, when I say better care, higher quality care, because if you are mentally ill, you're much better off to be controlled and living in your community, close to your family and so on, rather than up in a hospital somewhere. So that is what an integrated universal healthcare system, as we were talking about, does. Because universal healthcare wasn't just about financing, it was about financing and management and integrating the services. So harnessing all the providers, be they community providers, as public hospital providers, private hospital providers, private practitioners, harnessing everybody and making sure that everybody is delivering the kind of care at the kind of costs that we monitor, control, and are comfortable with. So, for instance, as they do in BVI, they will allow private practitioners to be part of the UHC. So, in other words, you could choose to go to your private practitioner. So your UHC was portable. You could go to a private practitioner. However, there'll be a 20% copay if you went to your private practitioner. So the NHI will pay this amount of money, $80 or whatever, and you'd pay $20 for whatever the service you are getting. And what it did, it actually contains not only the public service, but it contains the private services as well. And there's a benefit to the private practitioners being on, because if they are a NHI or UHC provider, they therefore get traffic. It's business, right? So you want, rather than seeing 5 people in your office, you see 15 people, but you get less per person. Fair enough. But so there are practitioners who buy in to that. Some opt out, and that's okay. They can stay out, and in which case it's you either private insurance or out-of-pocket payments to those practitioners. But those that are in are part of the system. They're on the same information system, so they're linked. So we would know what they're doing. We would know what they're prescribing. We know how they're prescribing. We know that they're following the standards of care that we have promoted as being the right standards of care for our country, and so on and so forth. So that, I think, is where a UHC not only is cost effective, but it is quality controlled. And that is the kind of service we want, and the kind of service we could easily have. I do agree when I've mentioned that there are going to be private practitioners out there who right now would actually be railing against that and say, no, I don't want any cost containment, any controls, any quality controls on me. I give high quality service myself, and I have my patients, and I don't want any interference in that process. Fair enough. We all understand that sentiment. But at the end of the day, you've got to step back and you've got to look at your country, and you've got to say, what's in the best interest of my country and me?
But Doc, how many people are altruistic?
Okay, my mother had the best saying one time for me. She told me, learn enlightened self-interest. Learn that it is better, for instance, to join and maybe get a little less, but have a lot more. I don't know if you see where I'm coming from. So I run a lab, for instance. So if I'm a UHC or NHI provider within that network, they will pay as per a schedule of fees, the same as they would pay at VH or St. Jude's or wherever, or the OKEU, right? But that would be okay. Why? Because they get volume. So I will have more volume. I will be linked in. I don't have a problem with that. So and I think that people need to understand that giving up some of your independence to be involved in a better system that works for you and for everybody else, that is what we mean by enlightened self-interest. And I think if people realize that the existing system of individual practices going on their own, that model will not be mainstream for much longer. In fact, group practices throughout the world are already coming on. People are already merging. And what the NHI UHC does is causes all of us to merge in a particular way to deliver a national essential package of health services. And I think that is the kind of conversation we would want to have with private as well as public providers.
You're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television with me, Timothy Paul. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion whether we'll be having a health fund and whether St. Lucians can expect, if we have such an initiative being implemented, a better quality of service being provided to them. Back in just a moment. Welcome back and thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Polio and my guest is former Chief Medical Officer Dr. Stephen King. Doc, we have a tendency to ask the St. Lucian public to make sacrifices. Increase the cost of water by 100%, you'll get a better quality and it will be more reliable. Pay certain amount extra on your water bill again, and then there'll be the silting of the Sir John Compton Dam. This has not happened. And now, if you were to say to the St. Lucian public, pay a little more, from your 5% to 7.5%, and the same for the employees, and you will get so-called basket of services and all that. And what if the authorities fail to deliver to the people on this and still have to go to, if it's VH or the new general hospital, do not get services within a reasonable period of time and so on, do not get medication and proper treatment? You anticipate the hue and cry from the people on this issue.
Of course. And that is why I've always said I think it's an overall reform of the health service. You have to make sure we put the right management in place and we put the right integration of services, the right coordination, the right quality control, the right checks, good information systems and so on in place. You cannot just raise the money, put it in a fund and off you go. Put a budget to the hospital and that's it, we finished. No. The hospital, the OKEU, and in fact the Millennium Heights Medical Complex is a major player in an overall system. And that overall system needs to be properly managed and properly controlled and properly integrated for the people to get the benefits that they would like to see. Otherwise, we will have problems. So for instance, if we don't upgrade our polyclinic services, right? Because we were talking about moving to VH an urban polyclinic, which is an upgrade. So we'd have like an upgrade even of the Grosley Polyclinic. It will offer more services than that at the urban polyclinic, at the VH site when we move from it. Let us say when we do that, we need to make sure that Grosley, the urban polyclinic, that's Castries Polyclinic as we call it, Soufrière, Dennery, Vieux-Fort, that these facilities up their game as well, and they can start provide services so that people don't flood into the emergency room and flood into the new National Hospital, the OKEU, because what's going to happen if they do that, then the waiting times are going to be long. People are going to quarrel and so on and so forth. So that is why the whole system has to be, to me, reformed. I think also, I don't want to ask people to be patient, but I would ask people to, and I think you were saying it in the break, we need to get out there and speak to people seriously, and all stakeholders and all the general public, let them understand what we're trying to do and understand their role in making sure that it's successful. Because it's not, for instance, that the government and the doctors and the nurses will do this. It's all of us. So even the general public has a responsibility. Each individual out there has a responsibility to understand the health service and understand how to use the health service in the best possible manner. So don't bypass a particular facility to get up to the OKU and then quarrel because it's not delivering in the timely fashion that you wanted. So I think it's important that we do that. And we want to make sure, in fact, that for me it's important in terms of equity, fairness, that the health services throughout this country are pretty much the same. So whether you're in Vieux Fort or you're in Saltibus or wherever you are, you're in Gros Islet, you as a resident in this country can be assured of a quality of service that is comparable no matter where you go. And that is not the situation right now. The health system is very different in the different parts of the country. So that I think we need to also address. I was going to say as well, we were talking earlier about the resistance from certain people. But I speak to my colleagues a lot, and most of us, our problem is not doctors don't, and people will say, yeah, right. Doctors don't really focus on the money because we were not trained that way. And that is not why people go into medicine. I'll tell you what frustrates doctors the most is not being able to get the services that they need for their patients, and not having the facilities. So they need to get an MRI, they can't get it. They need to get a particular diagnostic test, they can't get it. And then they have to make, shall we say, less informed decisions because they're not getting the kind of support from the system. So as we are improving the service, we must also improve, for instance, the laboratories and the radiology. Let's take the new radiology facility at the OKEU. We have MRI, we have CT, we've got mammograms, we've got ultrasound, we've got the more than one digital X-ray, fluoroscopy, and so on. We've got the whole. However, it's going to cost us to commission it and to maintain it. The estimates we have, it's about $300,000 US or so to commission and maintain with a company like Siemens, which is where the equipment comes from. So even as we going up there, for instance, in a move in the next few weeks, we need to make sure that we get that up and running. Now, you'd appreciate this is money that we were not spending before. This money has to be found from somewhere. But the people will benefit. I think the people will be very happy to know that they can get an MRI. They don't have to go to Martinique or Tapion Hospital for an MRI. In fact, I want to come back to Tapion a little bit.
Where you have shares.
Oh, yes. Let me come back to Tapion. You know, that's a good example of why doctors do what we do. Tapion Hospital, 11 of us thought about it. That building was designed as a hospital before. But the level of care at VH and the level of diagnostic capacity and so on was, in our view, not adequate at the time. And we felt that can we, as a group of St. Lucians, can we get together and put up a hospital, yes, private, can we put up a hospital that could deliver higher quality care, right? Which is what we did, right? And you can argue about Tapion Hospital, but many people, when we went around, because there are over 50 shareholders in Tapion Hospital, because we didn't have the money ourselves to do it. When we went around and we asked people to invest, people say a hospital, that can't work. A private hospital in St. Lucia, that can't work. But it has worked. Now people quarrel about the prices at Tapion Hospital, but the truth is, Tapion Hospital has to fund itself. The same, and it's a good lesson to learn here. And a couple lessons, in fact. I want to give you a conversation between Stephenson King and Sir John Compton and myself and my father at the time. But anyway, back to it. People need to understand that if you underfund your service, you can never deliver the quality that people are asking for. And that is why the National Health Fund, the UHC, is so important. We must find extra monies and put into the health system because it is underfunded. At the very beginning, I even pointed out to you that in general, we are easily 20% below the rest of the Caribbean in terms of what we put into healthcare. Okay. I remember when we were forming Tapion Hospital, And by the way, you said about a shareholder, but I'm a minor shareholder. Very
You're
minor.
still a shareholder.
Yeah, but minor. So and we get
But I'm not grudging you for that.
no, you can't. But by the way, we get no dividends.
Right.
The Tapion Hospital doesn't make a profit. So, although I have make a profit this year, but anyway, we normally it has never made a profit in my. So we've never received any monies from Tapion, right? In fact, I rent space from Tapion. But anyway, when we went to John Compton at the time, because Stephenson King was the minister, and John was telling him, "You sure you want to support this?" He said, "Yes, PM." So John Compton told him, "But hey, you know that what will happen is VH will come like the marketing board, right? Everybody will just bypass that, you know." And so that was, now the thing about Sir John, what I liked about him was he would always provoke. He'd always throw, to me, he always put out these provocative things. So, and Stephenson King, I remember him when he said, he said, no, sir. Solutions will understand the cost of healthcare when they open that hospital, because they will have to pay real fees. You cannot pay pseudo fees. Who's going to put the rest of the money in? It'll close. Any business that does not pay its bills is going to close. So when they do that, then you'll see people will begin to appreciate what they have at VH a lot more. And that has worked. Stephenson King was right on that, right? But anyway, even that though made a point that a lot of doctors, that was done not to make money for doctors. I'm speaking at the time. It wasn't done to make money for the doctors. It was done to actually have a alternative high quality care. And we also felt that if you raise the bar anywhere in the country, the rest of the service would also raise their bar. And so we felt that VH would raise the bar too. And I think, and VH has.
What happened to you with regard to your contract, which was you are given an assignment, a 3-year assignment?
Yes.
Started in June of 2016, terminated May 31st of this year. And it was to recommend ways to move the health sector to a more modern and effective place.
Yeah.
Your one, it has been terminated. What happened?
Well, let me tell you. And I think you've seen it was a policy decision the government made. That they had I think we've done my work, right? Had not completed in terms of what I think could have been done, but a fair amount of work has been done. And in fact, as you remember, I was supposed to deliver reports, which I have done, to the government. That's been done.
So your report you consider would be incomplete?
No, my report is complete.
Okay.
Right? It's complete with what I have to date. But where the government is now is moving into an implementation phase. So the design, yes, we have to finalize the design. I have proposed to them a particular design, right? And by the way, when I say me, it's not just me, it's a whole team, because I had great support from the health planning unit, Lauren James and Zyster Edmond, so a lot of, even PAHO with Dr. Cowley and them. So we've had a lot of brain power has gone into it. It's not just mine. So we've delivered to them what we think is feasible, right, in terms of taking the health sector forward. It is now for the government to make those decisions as to what it takes forward. And like I said, even when I was interviewed, personally, I'm a St. Lucian, right? I have nowhere else to go. So I have no problem working with the government or not working with the government, as the case may be. So if the government requires my help, if they think I can help, I'll be prepared to help. But I think they'd reached a point where they felt that, well, I had given what they wanted from me, and that was enough.
Do you agree with that?
Well, what is there to agree or disagree with?
No. Do you believe that the government erred in making that decision?
No.
Because you had 2 more years left.
No, they haven't erred. I mean, because they will move into the next phase. They have a lot of support, They've got EU consultancies that will come in. They've got World Bank people that will help. They've got a whole raft of people. So, I mean, they have the capacity to go on their own.
But would you have wanted to complete your assignment?
Let me tell you, I've lived in health all my life, right? My father was a doctor, and actually, at one point in time, lived on that VH site. So I have been in the health sector from the time I didn't even know myself, right? And my father was the kind of person that would always be talking to me about healthcare, about and things so. So for me, I've always been steeped in health. When I went to do medicine in 1977, I was very happy. Came back here in '83, worked in Soufriere. It's great, no problems. And I felt, and even there, I could see that I already had a passion for wanting to fix the systems in healthcare. I was working with Mr. Lamontine at the time. And you know, he a real Soufrierian, right? And we worked hard to improve that hospital, get x-rays in that hospital, get generators for the hospital, getting Alcoholics Anonymous groups going, and so on and so forth and so forth. So I have always been of that mind. So when I came back here, Cornelius Lubin sent me off to do pathology because they wanted to upgrade the labs. I don't remember what our lab services used to be like. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I came back here in '89, and with the help of Mr. Lubin and the then Minister, Romanus Lansico, we lifted that health service in terms of the lab services. We really took it to a different level. We had virtually no automation in the lab at that time. We moved so people could begin to get their tests within the hours rather than the days and weeks that it used to take. So I've always been there, and I've been in and out. So for me, although it's my life, whether I'm in with government or I'm out of government, I'm still in healthcare. So I'm available if government wants. If not, well, that's okay too. But I really want to see it happen. And I was pleased to go back this year, or for the last year. Why? The one thing that was missing, in my view, because remember, I was chairman of the health sector reform when Sarah Flood was the minister back in 1997. We delivered a report in 2000, which I think is still that report with that committee we had, which included Mr. Lubin, I might add, and Dr. Bobran and Father Stephen Quinlan, our good friend Truscott Augustine Suku,
yeah, Suku, okay.
Right? We had good people. We produced a great report, right? We went on, when I came back as CMO, we produced a National Strategic Plan for Health, 2006, 2011. Again, I think again, a really good document. However, what has always been missing has been the financing component, how to finance. So we talked about organization, we talked about this, but the actual nitty-gritty of how to finance was what was missing. Coming back this time, I had the wonderful opportunity of being able to work with people and work with tools, health tools that we had, that allowed us to do really detailed financing, down to people in community, down to people, services in the hospital. And we have a tool tools that can break the financing down anyhow you want, and track it any which way, which we never could do before. So I was so thrilled to be able to be part of that and to see that I already got it. So from my own personal point of view, I've already benefited, and I've seen it. You know, I say, mine eyes have seen the glory. I've seen it. I can see what can work, and whereas before I could smell it, I could almost get it, but I couldn't truly see it. But this last year, I saw it. I saw exactly how we could do it, and it really doesn't bother me.
There's been a notable change over the last few months. I think we have more trained pathologists right now.
Oh yes.
About how many, in addition to yourself?
We have Dr. Emmanuel, Dr. Felician, we have Dr. Wilson, right? Three, and we. In fact, that's really that. When you think about that, that's another. As far as I'm concerned, great success. Pathology is something that not many people go into. It's usually one of the more underserved areas. We in St. Lucia are actually well placed with pathology. And that gives us an opportunity. In fact, I want to say we have another young pathologist, Dr. Marissa Jacob, who is ready to come back, another St. Lucian. So what, in the same health system that I'm talking about, I think we now have an opportunity to create a regional pathology service operating out of St. Lucia, right? So we could, in fact, why just regional? Maybe even greater than regional. The truth is, if we did some investments, which is what I'm trying to look at right now in the pathology service, we can create the next set of reforms in the labs. Remember I mentioned when I came back here in '89 how we were able to reform and get automation. Mm-hmm. Well, nowadays, labs now, we're into precision diagnostics now. We're into genetics and molecular pathology and immunohistochemistry and all these kinds of stuff. So we're into a more sophisticated level of medicine, which is what is demanded by doctors at this point in time. And you would appreciate no longer do we do the technology. Health technology has moved on so much. So I think we are well positioned to create that regional service. What that would do, we could actually start to create, start looking at health like an industry, which is one of the concepts that we have in the design as well, where it's not just about doing healthcare for your people, it's actually about using health to create revenue for the government, for the people, by selling services. So, and pathology is a service you could sell very easily. You can move samples anywhere, anyhow.
And that would reduce the cost of providing healthcare to your people?
It does a number of things. The beauty of that is that lab services are very volume sensitive. We only have 175, 200,000 people in our country. In the OECS, there might be, 500 to 700,000 people or so. That market is what we would need for us to be able to invest in the equipment and what is necessary to get a return on that investment. So in other words, because there's a certain fixed cost to having to put these things up, and you need a certain volume to make it cost effective to do it. So for me, this is our opportunity right now. Now, whether we will capitalize on it and make it so, I don't know, because this will not stay for long. Our capacity that we have in pathology will not stay forever, because what will happen is, certain pathologists will die, other pathologists will leave, because if they're not getting the amount of work that they need even to survive, they will not be here. So people like Marissa Jacob may think twice, and she's an excellent pathologist, well trained. She will think twice about coming back if there's no space for her.
Do you provide your services overseas still?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I do a lot more work overseas now.
Okay.
So I work for the Northern Territories in the Caribbean, and that works well. That I mentioned BVI.
And get paid in what, the US?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm just prying.
Yeah. Well, you can pry. It's okay. You know, it's you know, I mean, life is like that.
Right.
Doors closed, doors open. Don't fight it. Have faith. Step forward. That's how I live. You know. So life's good.
All right, that's Dr. Stephen King, former Chief Medical Officer. We're having a great discussion. We'll be back in just a moment to continue. And of course, we'll be taking your calls. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. We'll put a telephone number on screen right now so that you can call with your questions and comments for my guest. Once again, he is Dr. Stephen King, former Chief Medical Officer. Doc, what about St. Jude? We had the fire destroying that health institution several years ago. It is yet to function. Okay, we have a call. Hello, good evening. This is Newsmaker Live. Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Hi, good evening to you.
Hello, good night.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening to you.
Good night, Doc. I need to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Our DNA services here is very expensive.
Yes.
Can something be put in place to make it a little cheaper for the normal person?
Okay. All right. The question
Thank
is,
you.
the DNA service is a bit expensive.
DNA?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can you make it cheaper?
Well, yes. But the way to do that, the DNA service is actually a contracted out service to, I can tell you from a private point of view, we do it to CariGen, which is UE, a UE lab. The way to make it cheaper, and I was talking to Fernanda Henry at the forensic lab about it, is for the forensic lab to actually start doing DNA testing for paternity. So that is, to me, that's the way to do it more cheaply.
Okay. We continue to take your calls. Once again, you're watching Newsmaker Live, and my guest is Dr. Stephen King. We're focusing on health. We have covered a lot of ground tonight, and I'm sure that you yourself would have your own questions. Another call. Good evening. Hello.
Yes, good evening, Tim.
Good evening to you, sir.
And special good evening to Dr. King.
Good evening.
Yes, Dr. King. Before I start, as they say, you cannot keep a good man down. Excellent job that you have done in the health department for St. Lucia. And I want to be short and brief. 2 questions, Doc. As regards to the diabetes research center that was proposed under the former administration, is that still in play? And the other question, Doc, as far as the eye sector is concerned, in fact, I was just going through a session earlier on, and there's some research from Barbados, and then St. Lucia is deemed to be the second highest with glaucoma at 9%. And there has been a high proliferation of that eye disease called uveitis, Doc. What is it that the current government or the health sector has to do? Because the health is wide, huge, and if you do not have a healthy nation, you would have a wealthy nation. And I assume in recent times, because of the proliferation of the uveitis and glaucoma, that it is something that has not really been addressed. Although in a small way, Doctor, I need to say that with no fear or favor of contradiction, that the Cubans have done an excellent job, especially at VH. More could have been done in terms as regards to the support by governments. I would like you to dwell on that, Doc.
Thank you so much for calling. Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, so the
Diabetes Research Center.
Okay, the Diabetes Research Center. The previous Diabetes Research Center was actually that was shelved. However, there's a new model that we're looking at, and we propose it in the design. Where what we do is we create a Center for Health Innovation at the OKEU, which is just really an office. But what that office does is it coordinates research, especially research and development. And we actually have with the Diabetes and Hypertension Association, we are looking at doing a research project in diabetes right now as the first one to actually start to see how we can gear up an innovation center. Because I think it's important that we do have that focus on research and development, especially in the health area. Because it's quite fascinating. Dr. Gannon from the from IAU in the South sent me a link today to the Lancet looking at diabetes in sub-Saharan Africa. We're showing a big problem in those countries, just like us. And in fact, making the point that we need to do our own research to find the best model of care that can have the best outcomes for us. So we must not just adopt first world standards. We must actually look at the first world standards, look at what they do, but then adapt them in our culture, our context. And that is where the health innovation comes in.
Hold that point. Mr. Producer, do you have the call in line? Okay, let's go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, go ahead, please. Thanks for holding on.
Yeah, good evening. I'm calling to find out, will there be a oncology unit at the new hospital.
Okay, thanks a lot, sir.
Actually, we've set up an oncology unit at the VH, and right now our plan is to continue the oncology outpatient unit where you get chemotherapy at VH. We don't have space for oncology unit per se at the OKEU. Mind you, patients with cancer will be treated there because there's surgery and medicine and so on and other services, so they will be treated. But the specialist oncology care in terms of chemotherapy would be done, would probably still continue at the old VH site. Now, but for cancer, and I think it's important, in fact, it'd be really nice, you should speak to Dr. Gabriel and get his take on it. But we need to have a really coordinated national cancer program where, again, through the same UHC we're talking about, people can have access to radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and all the special diagnostic testing that is necessary that I spoke about with the labs, for instance, because cancer is where it's really important.
You have another call.
Yeah.
Good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller.
Yes, good evening to you, Tim.
Hi. Good evening to you, sir.
And good evening to your guest.
Good evening.
Tim, I recall some years ago, you had the current CMO on one of your programs, and again, she was making the point that what is required, like Dr. King said, in order to have health insurance is the finance, and that is a problem, that was keeping us behind, from implementing universal health care and so on. Now, I recall some years ago when VAT was imposed on medication and so on, I recall Dr. King, along with the Medical and Dental Health Association, calling on the then Prime Minister to impose VAT on things like cigarettes and alcohol instead of on medication, and he ridiculed the idea. Now, some time ago, I think it was either the World Health Organization or the Pan American Health Organization was suggesting to Caribbean governments that they impose taxes on things like alcohol and tobacco, in order to see after the health situation in the Caribbean islands. So what I would like to suggest, that if we have, in order to first to implement health insurance, universal health care, there is need for a revenue stream in order to finance universal health care. So perhaps the government can look in that direction. I mean, impose taxes on things like alcohol and cigarettes and so on, so that they can get the revenue in order to implement the health insurance, because I think that is very crucial, that is very vital right now. And people are suffering, a lot of people are dying because they are not able to afford health care and so on. So that's my suggestion to the government in order to finance universal health care.
Thank you so much for calling, sir.
I fully agree with him, and the WHO makes the point that it's actually a health promotion activity as well, because when you raise the taxes on these unhealthy products, people use less of them and you get less disease. So not only do you raise revenue, but you actually have a positive impact on the health of people. So I think he makes a great point, and I also have advised the government to.
We have another call. Good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller.
Good evening, Tim.
Hi. Good evening. Good evening to you, sir.
All right, and doctor?
Yes, good evening.
How are you?
I'm well.
Okay. Not even the great America getting this healthcare thing right, with all the money.
Well, because of politics.
I don't want to sound cynical, but let me ask you a question, Doc.
Mm-hmm.
Can you cite any jurisdiction, any country, like for like, similar to St. Lucia, where they getting this healthcare thing right? It's financed and it's working good?
Yeah, the one that I have identified is the British Virgin Islands.
The British Virgin Islands.
Yeah, that's the one I identified.
That's an independent country?
Yes, the British Virgin Islands it has its self-governance.
All right, okay, yeah, okay.
And it it's if you look at what they've done. In fact, it was the Health Economics Unit in UWI that helped them to design their financing system. Now, like all systems, they have problems, but when it comes to the financing of their healthcare, they have made a significant impact, positive impact.
You see,
by what they've done.
My thinking, and I don't want to sound, I think, that this thing in economies like ours is insurmountable, trust me. We could do the best we can, all right? That is what we're striving to do, all right? And get, optimum what we can for the most people. But this thing is not going to work in economies like ours. This thing is working in Cuba because of the nature of the economy, my brothers. You understand? No, we want to reform. There was a time we were talking about reforming this, reforming that, reforming that. We have to realize that reform in major sectors don't happen unless the whole is being tackled. The whole economic reform. You understand? Our taxation methodology, everything. And you cannot just reform education out there by itself alone. You cannot reform health by itself alone. And that in itself is a gargantuan task, to just reform the whole economy where everything moving in unison and we recognize as a people. Because, Doc, sometimes I think you're utopian and you come saying, we must come together, talk to the people, and we must make this happen. The people must say, what's that, the people? What? In what forum? Where? Which institutions? The unions? The civil society? The youth groups? Just spontaneously come together? We must come together? I mean, come on, let me face the reality of this country, my brothers. You know what I mean? These things sound good, but I mean, that's for... Sometimes it sounds like Greek mythology, man. Utopian. My brother. And lastly...
But Sugu, you must not always be pessimistic, Sugu.
That's not pessimism, man. That's reality, man. What, Margie, you like to come when I say pessimism. That ain't pessimism.
You must be optimistic from time to time.
Let me show you something there now. Okay? The doctor talking about, let us try and convince and persuade his colleagues that volume could make up for high price thing, quantity, could make up for a thing. But look at that. I mean, I know somebody, an elderly person going to Tapio for 2 days, 4,500. Medication even come there. Power Maliwek, I just more paisa. Before while we talking all this, for years people just suffering in silence and dying. They're sending them home to die. That's like old dogs go in the bush and die. And we keep talking. I mean, there must be fundamental change. A whole heap of the economy has to go towards health. And that means that people have to lower the standard of living from what they know. Is that going to happen? Because this is why Cuba is why it is so today, How many people have a burning a Mercedes-Benz? Look, I already bringing down a new set of Mercedes, a new set of cars, the latest. How many people want to forego that kind of thing so that we could have health? To drive in a little thing, a cheap car and live in a modest home and so on. So when we're talking about reforming health, my brothers, let me face reality, reforming education and reform. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, Sugu, yes. let's hear from Doc on that.
In fact, Sugu,
thank you so much for calling.
I remember Suku stuck in my mind because when we were having the health reform committee one time and we were proposing something, Suku said, "What? We're doing all that we want to do? But I thought we were just going to put some little paint and make the thing look a little bit better. Let's do things we could probably." But Suku, I want to tell you that you hit a number of excellent points, and I mean I do understand that the health sector lives inside an economy. And the priorities within this economy and the priorities within people's lives are out of whack, right? I understand that. And we are not going to, by speaking to them, change them overnight. However, just as I was telling you in the same health reform committee, we have to start. We have to start somewhere. So we make a step. We try to do it right. So if health could get something right and could promote it, then maybe another sector, or it could start something else. Somebody will say, oh, they have it right. I like the principles. I like their approach. I like the solidarity approach that they're using, just like how the Cubans would have a solidarity approach to things. I like what the principles that health is promoting and the system they put in place. And who knows where we go to from there. In other words, you must have faith to start somewhere. Otherwise, you know what? It's all hopeless.
Let's see if we have another call. Hello, good evening. Newsmaker Live, you're on the air. Okay, we lost that call.
You see, I am not somebody that gives up on hope. I hold on to hope. And it's not about being optimistic to counter your pessimistic. I'm not overly optimistic. I know how difficult it is, you know. I mean, as I think we're alluding to, I've been thinking about this thing now for almost 30 years. And I know we have not made any great strides in those 30 years. But still, we must try. We must still promote what is right, and we must still try to do what is right. And for this, in this health system, here I disagree with Suka. I think we can implement something better.
Back to the calls. Good evening. Newsmaker Live, you're on the air? Okay.
You see, and that's why I say, that's why I'm so happy to be back in this time, because prior to that, yes, it was utopic. But now, when you look at the financing, the nitty-gritty, and you suddenly realize that it is feasible, as we've been talking about, then there you go. Then once you see that it can be done, even if it is not the perfect thing, so be it. And I mentioned BVI. BVI is, yes, its economy might be a little bit better than ours, but it's a Caribbean country, small population, right? Very similar to ours, and the economy is not that much greater than ours. Again, a very tourism-based type economy, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I'm being told that we have a call line. Let's go back to the telephone lines. Hello, good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller. Hello. Hello, good evening, caller. Go ahead, please. Hello.
The person in Morse code. Tick,
All
tick,
right.
tick,
Yeah.
tick, tick.
Yeah. All right. What about St. Jude? What has happened to St. Jude?
Well, St. Jude has found itself in a state of flux, sadly, I find, because St. Jude should have been finished by now. I think there was Project Creep at St. Jude, which has created an unfinished, more expensive, a lot of money has been spent and we haven't finished. And that is sad. But to be practical, we are where we are. So the technical audit was done. So we know where we are, and we know, or we can now figure out what we have to do next. How can we move from that stadium over to the hospital as quickly as possible, or what renovations can we do to move across as quickly as possible? The truth is, if you go to the stadium, you know very well this is not an ideal situation at all. The people in Vieux Fort, the people in the south have to go to St. Jude. This is not the place where they are comfortable, and the doctors themselves are not comfortable. We need to move to St. Jude.
Okay, we have a call. Good evening.
Good evening, Tim.
Hi.
Good evening, Dr. King.
Good evening to you, sir.
I'm liking the discussion. I think it's very healthy, no pun intended, and I think it's something that we really need to focus on. Dr. King, I like your passion, your enthusiasm, and I have 3 small points I'd like to make. One is health insurance, by virtue of what it is, should be shifting us in a direction. You mentioned one, which is shifting the delivery of care from the centers of care, the hospitals, to the community.
Correct.
I think we have to do that.
Correct.
Secondly, we need to shift people from a view of wellness, not what currently obtains.
Yes.
So giving them the incentives via the health insurance, maybe having premiums that might vary depending on how healthy you are or your attitudes to health. So whether you eat lots of fatty foods, drink lots of sugary drinks, or even whether you go to the gym, if in some way the insurance premium per person can vary based on those individual attitudes, then I think we'd be doing something really good. And finally, I think if those attitudes don't change, we'll be in big trouble. And I say that because if we don't change the attitudes of the people who work in the hospitals, who will be delivering the care to our people, then sad to say, we'll end up moving old people into a new facility and expecting more from them, which would not be fair. So I'm hoping that in this transition, in this great transition, that the people who are currently working, say at VH, who will be moving to the new hospital, in some way, we are getting them prepared to be thinking differently, to act differently, to deliver care in a way that people will expect in a new facility.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for calling, sir.
I want to say one of the points he makes is really important. Moving from hospital care to community care, that shift. And you can only do that in a truly integrated system, because right now it's a divided system. So it's almost like community versus the hospital. And again, you mentioned the workers moving across. Those of us who have to move across to the OKU, or workers who have to move across to OKU, must feel that they're part of an integrated supportive system and moving into a better healthcare, rather than a same old, same old. So I take your point.
Good evening. Newsmaker Live, go ahead, please.
Yeah, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
All right. The only suggestion of plan I have for these health initiatives, at least we could tax everybody at least $2, $3, I mean, every working person, and just put it to health. It go into a special fund to maintain the health system. Just $2 or $3 from everybody's salary, and just put it to health. Likewise, education and culture, and make it supply itself. It go into a special fund. You don't have to get mixed up. We could start somewhere. We could do something to maintain our hospital, our health institution, our education. Everything we could do. So you tax everybody $3 or up to $5 as long as you're working. It go to a special fund. If it overflow, then you send the rest into the treasury. And that's the best way I'm seeing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. What say you, Doc?
Well, yes, and in fact, as you'd appreciate, that's what we're talking about, creating a special fund. Well, my preference is under the NIC. You have a National Health Fund there, and it gets contributions from employers, employees, from the government, consolidated fund, and from taxation, so specialized taxes on unhealthy products, and you create a fund. So I agree with him. I think that's what you do. I don't think the $2 or $5 is quite enough, but his point, the principle is correct.
We will stand by now to take our final call. I think, no, we don't have that call. Okay. But I think you're talking a little bit about St. Jude before we start taking the call.
So I really think that what we need to do is come up with an immediate plan. So
let's take the final call. Good evening. This is Newsmaker Live. You're on the air. You are a final caller.
Hi, good night.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Yes, I just have a question. I'm a little lost when Dr. King says that he has everything except the finances. Shouldn't financing be part of the strategic plan?
Now, that's what happened was that when we did the strategic plan, the financing component was underdeveloped. And as I said, when we finished, I was always discontent with the finance, and that's why I was so grateful this time around that we had the right type of financial tools, and we were able, that's health financial tools, we were able to actually come up with a proper design for financing this time around, which is, so now it is complete. So that's why I say now, that's why I think I mentioned.
So where are the funds going to be coming from?
Oh, well, we mentioned that the funds will be coming from the NIC contributions, increased NIC contributions, from consolidated fund, that's the existing budget, in other words,
okay,
and from new taxes on unhealthy products. These were the areas that we looked at to do and create a hybrid model into a professionally managed separate fund, not the consolidated fund, a health fund.
Okay, just one last comment. I just wanted to find out, did you all prioritize in terms of what you want first, or
when you say
in terms of the little initiatives within the big project?
When you say so, you mean like, could we do this step first and then that step and then that step?
Yes, something like that, rather than looking at the big picture and trying to implement everything at the same time.
Yes. Well, the thing is, you have to have a scaled up approach to things, and there are certain steps you must make. The truth is, though, however, you're going to have to make a quantum leap when it comes to creating the National Health Fund.
Okay.
So because you can't have a little fund, you're going to have the health fund. But you are right, and even there, in fact, if you think about it, you can probably still scale up. For instance, remember about in 2006, we did the diabetic UHC program, and we started to give medications for diabetes to all people with all people who had diabetes. Fair enough. What we could have done is create, like some countries have done, a national health fund based on that little project, and then expand that to other pharmaceuticals. And then, so we could have done hypertension, we could have done chemotherapy, we could have done, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
that seems a little more feasible to me rather than waiting to do the big thing.
Right. I understand.
Yes.
But you know, but like Tim was saying earlier, I don't know if you were listening earlier, there are certain decisions that we should have made a long time ago, and we would have been able to do the more incremental approach.
Right.
But unfortunately, we have now hit almost a crisis point where we are going to be opening up hospitals that are going to be demanding a lot of money, and we don't have the money. So we need to find the money. So that is a bit of a dilemma that we're in right now. But
Okay.
your point is well taken.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for
If you can
calling
scale up, rather than try to do the big thing all one time.
Final comments from you, Doc?
Well, you know, all I can tell my fellow St. Lucians is, hey, we on St. Lucia together. We're gonna live and die together. Let's see what we can do to, at least in this area, come together to try and put a better health system in place. Because what we have right now is not working for us as it could, and in fact, you could say as it should. However, in my view, whether people believe me or not, but in my view, having looked at it as I have, I think we have the capacity to change it, and with not earth-shattering things, but relatively simple things that can change this health system and make it far more effective and far more supportive and better for people, so people do not have to be hopeless and die, as you were talking about earlier. So I really think we can. And the other thing is, I just want to reinforce to everybody, last message, at the end of the day, each of us is in charge of our own health. So get the knowledge and prevent your diseases from coming on as best you can. In other words, you know, eat right, sleep well, exercise, because these are key elements in you staying healthy. And we all have a responsibility to manage our bodies ourselves. The health system is there to support us and to help us, but don't give up on the fact that we each have our own responsibility.
Thank you very much, as always, Dr. Stephen King, for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live, former Chief Medical Officer, as always, as well. Thank you so much for watching the broadcast and contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked. As a broadcaster, it's a very good evening. My name is Timothy Polio. See you next time.